are now calling for tax cuts.
Of course, it depends what kind. Former Treasury Secretary under President Clinton and President of Harvard, former President of Harvard, that is. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah,
Larry Summers,
out, wasn't he?
Yeah, right. Larry Summers spoke at the Brookings Institution in Washington today. He says keeping taxes or some taxes low is key to keeping our economy afloat. Listen up.
It is reasonable to suggest that stimulus approaching $50 to $75 billion, roughly in the range of 0.5% of GNP, is likely to be appropriate. The largest part of this stimulus should come in the form of tax cuts distributed equally among all taxpayers and recipients of tax refunds.
Yeah. So if even Democrats like Summers are calling for some tax cuts, will Congress follow their lead?
Let's ask our Fox panel about it. Wayne Rogers, what do you think? I mean, Larry Summers is highly regarded by many people on both sides of the aisle. But do you think this will sway the Democrats in any way?
No, I don't think so. Larry Summers can talk about this. People are talking now about the fact that, for example, that Greenspan, by lowering interest rates back in the early 2000s, possibly was responsible for some of this stuff that's going on now. Possibly. Larry Summers saying to cut interest rates right now is not responsible. No, I don't agree with that at all. It's not a question of inflation. It's a question of somebody has to take the hit, and they've got to do it now, and we might as well get it behind us.
But, Mike, in addition to cutting taxes, he's also talking about putting in a lot of money to bail out homeowners.
Well, he's talking about a package of tax cuts and spending to increase the deficit as a fiscal stimulus. It's a brilliant move. If Congress, let's put it this way, doesn't go along with it, I think they're silly. Look, it's pure Keynesian. It works. It got us out of the Depression in the 1930s. President Bush used it after 9/11 as a combination.
Explain the Keynesian
John
theory.
Maynard Keynes says that, the free economy is fine, but from time to time it could mess up, and in order to get it back on track again, you need a combination. You need the government to spend, to apply stimulus, what we economists call aggregate demand. Pick it up. That's what he's talking about here. And it works. We saw it in Japan. They pushed interest rates down to 0%. It did nothing. It wasn't until the Japanese started to spend that their economy turned around.
Or cut taxes.
Peter Schiff.
Well, it doesn't work. What Mike Norman is talking about is inflation. The free market works by itself. It's the government that interferes with the free market that creates these booms and busts. Wayne said it. He said maybe Alan Greenspan was responsible. Of course, he was 100% responsible. And, when these politicians talk about cutting taxes, if they don't talk about cutting spending, all they're doing is going to create more inflation. And so maybe we get a little bit of a bump in our take-home pay, but everything costs more. That's why prices are going up, because politicians are simply printing money.
But, Nicole, even Charlie Rangel, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, said we should perhaps think about cutting corporate taxes, cutting our corporate tax rate. Wouldn't that be a stimulus to the economy?
Definitely. I mean, any kind of tax cut is a stimulus in some way, shape, or form. And, both on the corporate spending front, because, corporations spend a lot of money in the U.S., and we're very dependent on that corporate spending, especially the IT industry, for example.
It's not a stimulus if the government keeps spending money, because if they don't take it from us in taxes, they have to take it from us some other way. And they end up taking it with inflation. The Federal Reserve prints the money and spends it into circulation. And it debases the dollar, and it causes prices to go up, and we all pay for the cost of government. There's no free lunch.
Wait, can we get back to the tax cut issue and how Larry Summers might be influencing some Democrats at some point? Wayne, do you think that could be a possibility? I know I asked you that before. We kind of got off on a tangent, but I'd love to know your thoughts on this.
No. I don't think he influences Democrats at all about tax cutting. Individual members of the House and individual members of the Senate are controlled primarily by their own constituency, and that's what they're catering to. And they also have to cater to their own constituency within those bodies, namely that you vote for me on this, I'll vote for you on that. It's not going to influence the Democrats at all. It might influence the presidential candidates who want to cater to something like that. But Peter's absolutely right. No, you've got to cut spending. That's the problem.
Look, there's this conventional wisdom, which happens to be wrong, that we need to run surpluses or balanced books. 70% of the time in the history of the country, we have never done so. We've grown the biggest economy this world has ever seen. In the 1930s, we applied these principles, and it wasn't only the United States, it was the world. We had a global depression And by the way, many countries pulled out of their depressions far earlier than the United States did. It was really wartime spending that got us out because we kind of held back. We took this course of fiscal conservatism.
You ought to read Murray Rothbard's book on the Great Depression to really understand. You constantly rewrite history.
This is not the 1930s.
100% wrong.
Hey, you're the one that brought
Wayne, go ahead, Wayne. Go ahead,
Read
Wayne.
Rothbard's book, The Great Depression.
Wayne, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, I think, Mike, you couldn't be more wrong. This is not the 1930s. You're thinking something drastic here. You're rewriting history like Peter says. This is crazy. It has nothing to do with it. There are forces. You didn't even have a Federal Reserve who could do what it does today. These are all nutty ideas here. Look, it's a simple thing. It's a reevaluation. Somebody has to take the hit. You have to take the hit. And cutting taxes raising tax or cutting taxes is not going to help it. You've got to cut spending. That's what you have to do.
Wayne, we're all going to, I understand the moral hazard argument. You don't want to bail people out. I know, Wayne, you're against that. So many other people are against that. But do you want to have that spill over into the broader economy and really take us down? I mean, that's a question we're wrestling with here. And by the way, Wayne, monetary policy cannot fix these kinds of problems. We had Japan for 7 years. They kept interest rates at zero.
Let me get Nicole in here. Didn't President Bush already cut taxes? I mean, and if we continue, and we did that because we were dealt some dramatically horrible blows, such as 9/11, the Enron debacle. So we dealt with it that way. Is that enough? Was that enough, and we should just stop there?
This is sort of a slippery slope. You can't go too far with these tax cuts. Obviously, the government does need some money. All of this, the idea of cutting taxes, yes, it would be a stimulus. It should be a short-term cut, though. It shouldn't be anything that goes on.
Peter's right on one thing, if I could say this. And here is the crux of the argument, Peter. I'm going to agree with you on this. If we want to have a sensible discussion as to whether or not deficit spending creates an inflation, a debilitating inflation. That is the argument. I don't think anyone here today, or from what I've read all along the course of this, is talking about that happening. They're simply going with this conventional wisdom, which happens to be wrong, that we have to have balanced budgets, which is silly.
David? Mike just said Peter was right on one thing. Do you think Peter will ever say Mike is right on something?
On Christmas Eve, he will do so.
And anyway,
I suspect.
I'm a generous person. I give unconditionally. I don't ask for anything in return.
Right. And Wayne is rolling his eyes right now.
I'm getting nauseous. All right, Wayne, hold on a second. We're gonna have a chance to get back to